Hello, Internet friends. It's your favorite host, Donovan Farrow with the Secure AF podcast. Today, we'll be discussing topics of digital forensics, a little bit of news with that. We're going to talk about how digital forensics is influenced in the court system. We're going to talk about different positions in that role. And then we're going to go ahead and continue a walk on the process of how it should be conducted. During this podcast, if you can't listen to it, we will interject a small video, maybe anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes, of a digital forensic technique you can utilize for your department, whether you're working for a corporation or doing a legal hold yourself. So if kind of be aware from that, we encourage you to move over to YouTube to see the videos. You don't have to. If not, you can just hear my wonderful voice on the podcast. So with that said, let's grab a cold one and dig in. So first off thing is, what is a chain of custody? A chain of custody is a biographical life of a digital device. That is a term that I made up. So if it's somewhere close to a wiki or someone's quote, I didn't take it. I just said it out loud. So you guys can quote me on that and use that going forward. That is a super number one important thing you need to do when it comes to digital forensics, because if you can't prove the data hasn't changed over time, it cannot be introduced into court. Perfect example of that, chain of custody for let's see, at a murder scene. There are some bullet casings on the ground. We know, because we're all junkies and we watch, all kind of CSI, and we're into all the the murder podcasts as well, is that you can't just go pick up a bullet with your hand or a shell with your hand, because you would tamper the evidence, whether intentional or unintentional. So what they do is they put some type of placard out to identify the specific bullet casing. They'll probably use gloves. They will put it in a specific bag right where it was, and I'll probably take a picture as well. So all of this, taking the picture, writing it down, putting an evidence number, assigning it to it, and securing it in a safe place is all part of the chain of custody process. Well, Donovan, that's cool. We don't work with bullets. How does this work with IT technology? Great question. So, hard drives. So let's talk about hard drives for a second. Some hard drives, we talk about either they have spinny hard drives or they have the new memory hard drives, and that's air quote on the new. What happens is if you don't, let's say, preserve that evidence for court, you can't use it. So let's say you have some type of crime that happens on a hard drive. Someone could be downloading nefarious things on a machine. Once that's reported, a crime, an incident has occurred, it is the law enforcement's duty to go and preserve that digital device. That could be a mobile phone. That could be a GPS unit in a vehicle. That could be a hard drive, USB stick, CD. All that needs to be preserved. So they do what's called a forensic image. Here at my group, we don't sponsor anything by that, but we use a tool called FTK Imager. It's my favorite. It's free 99. They've had it forever. And if you want to be even Linux leaning that way, you can use the command DD, which is a bit-by-bit copy of a machine. It copies all the ones and zeros bit by bit and is an exact copy. How you verify that it hasn't been tampered with or changed during that time, you do what's called a hash. A hash is basically a scientific number you can put at a piece of data, proving that the data didn't change. It's like having a Windows document that has a specific fingerprint, and then if anyone went inside that document and changed anything, even hit a space and enter, the fingerprint would change. So it's always something to kind of have knowing going into an investigation. For digital investigators like myself, it's important to, when you verify the data, if you're getting it from whether it's opposing counsel or you're creating it, make sure you take a picture, just we talked about with the bullet casing, identify an evidence number, just like you would with the bullet casing, put it in a safe, we have these basically, they're kind of Verde bags, what they are, not all of them, depending on what the case is, and we'll lock it away and put it in the safe. So all of those are super important for preservations. Not all places have them, but make sure it's in a place where it can't be accessed by normal. You have to have specific access. It's highly recommended you have at least 2 to 3 doors to get to the said evidence. That way, when it comes into question in court, you'll be fine, and you can stand on your ground on the evidence actually true and sound. So again, it's important to always make sure that you store your data and your forensic images in a safe environment. What happens when you do a forensic image is you're basically taking an entire hard drive and you're copying it bit by bit and you're changing it into a file. So this file is usually an EX01, pretty typical. These files can be uploaded later. You can kind of like basically have a vision or a picture of what the hard drive looks like in maybe a tree format. If you're really savvy, we do this sometimes. You can actually boot a computer from a forensic image, which is really cool because then you can kind of surf it as if you were physically or actually there on scene of when the machine was collected. So that's pretty exciting. It's one of my favorite things to do. It is a little difficult and doesn't always work. So good luck with that. USB sticks, kind of the same way. One thing I forgot to talk about, highly important, the way you can do what's called it's an S word in court. It's attorney's worst S word. It's called spoliation. Spoliation is, again, it's just me firing from the hip here, is the intentional or unintentional change or disruption or deletion of data during transit or preservation. So what that sounded way smarter than it was. It's basically you taking data and manipulating it without knowing or knowing it. And if that does happen, that evidence can be thrown out of court because it's not true nor sound. So, for example, what you may not know this, you probably want to say it. So when you plug in a USB stick, there's a thing called plug and play, and it's been around forever. And then, again, I'm going to age myself. I remember when plug and play didn't exist. So you original Windows people know what I'm talking about. It was an amazing thing that happened. But what it does when you plug it in, it starts to write to that USB stick or even the hard drive, depending on what it is. You're automatically changing stuff on that hard drive. You're changing access times, mount times, a lot of information that you don't want to have to defend in court. So it's kind of can be very problematic, is what I'm saying. So what you have to do is use a write blocker in between yourself and the hard drive to help kind of protect from that. Also on a USB stick, if you plug it in, it also needs to have a write blocker too. And what it does, it doesn't have an automatic connection to it. It does a read-only collection from that. That way you can't change anything. And if, again, you go to court and say, hey, I had this USB stick, I had a write blocker, this evidence is true and sound when I took the forensic image. That way we can introduce it into court. Also, a lot of Linux, depending on, probably not these days, but they don't have plug and play. I don't know if the latest ones do. Most of them don't, but you have to do a mount. So that's kind of going back. You would have to mount them. I don't typically use that, but if you want to, it's a little cheaper to use the Linux versions. You can use that. There are a few, there's the SIF kit from SANS, which is a forensic leaning toolkit that is free. They have different imaging tools in that. And also one of my favorite forensic analysis tools, which is free and it's great, Autopsy, really good. It goes way back from a super old one called Scalpel. Big fan of those, and those could kind of help you do some data carving and stuff like that. So forensic imaging, we're talking about chain of custody. We're talking about preserving data to ensure that you don't delete, manipulate, change any information. Make sure you label it correctly and it is stored in a safe place that you can come back and check in on it. Another thing that when we're in a forensic investigation is, do we have receipts of if someone did get the data out of the evidence closet, did they write who it was and did they write what they did? Because that way you can know, because going back and forth can be helpful if something does change. Again, not saying someone's doing something malicious, but it could cause some concerns for you if you are in court and the evidence is not lining up correctly. So always have an evidence log as well for when the evidence is being pulled in and out of that environment. Going forward, once that whole job is done, and again, I would say that might be the most important part. A lot of stuff doesn't go to litigation, but it's always good to hang on to it, because if you do need it, some people are bound by financial institutions, maybe like 3 to 5 years. Attorneys have to hold it for 5 years. So having a dump truck of literal paper turned into a file might be a little easier for their life. But we'll talk about how that can get more of a nightmare down the road with a topic that is not my favorite topic, but it is a big topic called e-discovery. and that stands for electronic discovery. So kind of going forward from there, once we have the data secure, we're going to do what's called basically digital forensic analysis. This is the part where the who, what, where, why kind of comes into place. And these are a lot of the cases that we get. We always do the forensic imaging on the front. But we have a case where I had to work a case where a lady, apparently her baby had died, very tragic. And law enforcement was trying to determine if she had been surfing Facebook for an excessive amount of hours or on the internet. And so that one can be tough, right? So we get cases like that. So what we did is we took her cell phone and her computer and kind of stretched out the timeline on the base, because they had a chance, because the child had apparently been dead for like 2 hours by the time they found him. So they were trying to do for the child neglect thing. So we were actually able to determine, unfortunately, that the mother in this case never left the phone and never left the computer. So she was locked away in her room up to, I think it was 12 hours a day, just isolating herself on the internet and not taking care of the children, allegedly. I don't know what happened with the case, but that's just from our evidence side. That's what we were able to see. Why forensic analysis is important? I'll give you another one. We do something that's called data carving. Data carving is where we basically rebuild deleted data and make it into a viewable format. So you go out there and people commit crimes, and then you go and delete it. You go to recycle bin, not really deleted, and then you're like, Donovan, I got you. I'm smarter than you. I'm going to hit shift delete because I'm going to skip the recycler. I'm going to go straight to unallocated. So the way a machine works is there's a computer, a hard drive, there's unallocated and allocated. Allocated is the data you can see as if you booted up the computer and just started surfing around. Unallocated is I'll call it the hidden data that you can't see unless you had a forensic tool. So our forensic tool will do what's called a data carve. It looks for headers of each file. It looks for footers of each file and recreates that back to us so we can actually see it. We had one of my favorite cases, I remember this because it was on my birthday. It was, so we were going after, my law firm we were representing was going after another group that said they were doing some internal fraud, and that they were stealing money from the company. And this guy made a shell company, was reselling stuff back to his own company. And so we sent him what's called a litigation hold. We kind of talked about that. What that means is I'm going to send you a letter that says, hey, I have the intent to sue, so I'm going to need you to not delete anything and make sure you do a forensic image, or, pause everything, whether that's email, cloud, Office 365. They can get pretty nasty these days. So if you get one of those, it takes a lot of effort to cover that ground. And then what I did is we went to on-site. We did the forensic image. No problem. It's all easy peasy. They were actually really, really helpful on site. Didn't have any issues. So I was kind of surprised when the gym was like, hey, it's all there. Whatever you need, I'll even show you around. Very helpful. A nice guy, had a USB stick. We went through that, did the forensic image, went back, and I did a data carve on this hard drive. And I found out that he got served the legal hold notice, that intent to sue on this, at around 4:30 on that Friday. And then at 7:53 that night, he deleted basically all the folders and all the other companies that were in question. And I was able to get that because it was on my birthday. That's why I remember that one. It's kind of funny. So he got the letter. We found out he deleted data, which, by the way, is that we're going back to, so we're learning here, is the exfoliation, which is the badass word, which means that the court is going to just put a nail in your ass, honestly, is what it means. Because you basically, it's almost like, try to put it this way, it's like interfering with a crime scene. So if there's a crime scene that happens and you decide to just ride your bike through the blood that is on the pavement, you're probably going to get some really big trouble because you've changed the situation from what it should be for true effective analysis. Because what it happens at the end, you guys may not know this, I know sometimes the justice system is more just us than justice. It's my dad joke of the day, you're welcome, is that each party, what's the plaintiff or the defense, has a legal right to the exact same data. So if I myself collect data from a location, I should be able to give that to another forensic examiner, and we should be able to come to the same conclusion because it's a science. For the record, digital forensics is a science. If you want my opinion, I can give you my opinion, but the same data is collected the exact same way and should be analyzed the exact same way. So that's kind of what the digital forensics is all about. That's why it's a really good, strong witness in court as well. Digital forensics, also some other cases, kind of topical, is we do a lot of cell phone triangulation, and I'm telling you guys this because the court system's different the way it handles digital data. So what a lot of the law enforcement these days, as they travel, if you guys didn't know this, your GPS tracking device is in your pocket all the time, and it hits cell towers. So as you hit cell towers, what I tell people all the time, it wasn't meant to track people. It was meant to provide service. That's why some cell towers can go up to like maybe even 150 miles out, we'll say in Montana, on top of a mountain, right? And then some in the city, they can only go, we'll say maybe even a mile, just because there's so many cell towers. The more cell towers there are, it provides more service for the people using them, and you can track them, definitely. So on each cell phone tower, there's panels that you can do. We go in and we do forensics analysis on cell phone towers. We will collect the evidence from AT&T, for example. We would get what's called cell tower logs. They're raw logs, and it gives the lat and long of the tower. It gives the panel, because they have different panels, right? Because they face 360. And you can you can, not exact, but you can determine someone's kind of ish location. There was a case that we used this on, and again, allegedly, I don't know what happened. I don't follow the cases after we provide evidence. Allegedly, someone had a fiance that got, I'm going to mix this up just a little bit because I think this might be a fresh case. I'm for sure it's over, but we work so many cases. So person was alleged with murder. For some reason, their phone was determined to be at this location where the murder was. They couldn't find this person for, I think it was almost like a year or two. This lady had been chained to a tree and thrown into a river. So how they were able to figure it out is we were able to get the cell phone triangulation, cell phone information's not triangulation, you have to have 3, and determine a different burner phones that were in the area. And they were able to determine that this gentleman was in the area at that time and to put him in the place and the time of that murder. So that was pretty neat. Kind of going pretty neat, kind of obviously strange, but different things for digital forensics. So going through different court cases, I would like to stop and talk about what other jobs are there for digital forensics, because I get these asked all the time. So when we talk about like a digital forensic examiner, like I am, we have a mobile forensic examiner. We have a cellular forensic examiner. There's also a litigation. So e-discovery, kind of going the corporation, which I have some background with, is a company gets sued. You have to collect the documents. You have to put them through a process of, like, we want email with the word lunch. So I've worked many court cases in that aspect. There's a thing called basically Rule 26 is the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. I may have butchered that, but it's something close to that. It's basically a federal law that is bound for what is e-discovery. And a Rule 26 is when the attorneys sit down and they say, hey, we want to search these people's mailboxes, and we want to search for the term lunch, which, by the way, is a terrible idea, because you're going to get everyone your email that has the word lunch. So you're going to get everyone's email. You're going to search through everything. You're going to export that, which I said that really fast. That could take weeks to do, depending on the terminology you choose from, and then produce that in PDF format, put a bait stamp on it, which is the little number, evidence number 001 or evidence number 003. That's what they do in a corporate world, and that's actually a pretty heavy field. There's a ton of groups that are involved with that. It's a very large industry, and you can work for law firms, corporations, and even some forensic examiner firms that kind of go through that. It's actually pretty big gamut. Even almost on the compliance side, there's another field for kind of forensic examiner. It's more compliance. That's where you kind of do that governance and compliance for forensics. Is a litigation hold manager or a discovery asset manager. So litigation hold manager is someone who is in charge of any type of litigation comes in. They determine a mailbox needs to be on hold or data needs to be collected. The other one is discovery asset. So need to know what machines are out there, where evidence is, whether it's in a share, whether it's on someone's desktop, whether it's in the cloud. This is someone kind of having their arms around the whole group. And that is a very large job and can be very, I don't know, boring in my in my field, but it has to be done, because if you have some type of litigation hold or a litigation that is issued against your company, you have to know where all the data is, because what you don't want is the opposing counsel providing something that you didn't, because they're going to say that you're hiding data and you are a liar, and they want restitution for you manipulating the cycle. So kind of going to that, I kind of wanted to jump in here. We're doing something a little different. We're going to have one of my engineers, Peters, is going to do a quick little demo of a forensic image. There'll be a lot of content, obviously more video, but just listen to it. I'm going to have him do a step-by-step walkthrough of how to do a digital forensic image. Again, this is kind of a new format. We're wanting to do a little bit of what is new topics, how does it work in the real world, do just a quick little workshop, and at the end, I'm going to do a wrap-up for the rest of this interview and kind of explain the rest of digital forensics. So just hang tight. We're going to go to Peters, and he's going to teach you how to do a forensic image.
Hello everyone, this is Andrew Peters. I'm a security engineer over at Alias, where my specialty is digital forensics. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a forensic image with FTK Imager. So the first thing we have here is a Tableau forensic bridge. This is going to be our write blocker that we use to prevent a modification from happening to the hard drive that we're trying to image. And in this demonstration, we'll be imaging this flash drive here. The first thing we want to do is power on the Tableau. We'll wait for this to spin up. And one thing I would recommend is test these Tableaus before you use them on any active cases. There have been a few instances where we've had forensic imaging equipment not working properly, and you don't want it to accidentally overwrite or modify any data on your hard drives. So test these in a lab environment and verify that they're working properly before you do any active cases with them. Now that this is powered on, we can go ahead and plug the hard drive into the write blocked end of it. And we should see that it will detect the host, and it should give us a notification that it's write blocked as well. And now that we have that, we can go ahead and plug this blue cable over into our laptop, and we'll open up FTK Imager. All right, now that we have FTK Imager opened up, if we go over here and click on File, we can click Create Disk Image. For this, since we have a physical hard drive that we've plugged into the Tableau, we want to go ahead and click on Physical Hard Drive. However, if you have a logical drive, you could do that as well if you want to image just a single partition, or if you need to image the contents of a specific folder, you can do those as well. However, those will not capture unallocated space on the drive. Those will only capture the data that's currently stored there. Physical drive is what we want for this demonstration. Next, we will choose the physical drive that we want to image. I know that this is going to be physical drive 1. You can verify this by looking at the device name. This is just a generic USB device, so that doesn't help us a whole lot. But if you're using if you're imaging a Seagate or a Western Digital hard drive, it should tell you that here in the name of the device. Next, we are going to add a image destination, and we are going to choose a format. For this demonstration, I'm going to choose a EO1 forensic image file. And we will fill out the case number and examiner number here. Just put test for everything here. And next we will add the destination folder. I'm just going to put this on the desktop. and we will do the image file name. Let's call this test, and it doesn't want us to include the extension here. For the image fragment size, we can leave this at 1500. This will actually segment the image into a bunch of different files. However, if you're using any software like FTK or Magnet, it will detect that these files are fragmented, so that shouldn't be a problem. And we will now click Finish. We also want to make sure we click Verify hashes or Verify images after they are created. That will go through and it will hash the drive and the image, and it will verify that they're one-for-one copies of each other. And if you want to keep an eye on this, you can also do pre-calculate progress statistics. And then we can click Start. This will finish pretty quickly. Depending on the size of your hard drive, this process can take anywhere between just a few minutes to even longer than a day. But it will give you this progress bar here. It will tell you that there is an estimated time left. And then after it actually finishes making the image, it will go through and it will verify the hash values. And that's how you make a forensic image with FTK Imager.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Peters. Hope you guys learned a lot from that. That is one of the most important things, again, you can do with digital forensics. If you can't do a forensic image and it's not for you, then forensics is not for you. And I kind of wanted to echo that. This is part of a cybersecurity career. It's very important to understand this. One thing that we can kind of lean into a little bit is how this actually rolls into IR. And I think you guys will be more excited about, well, you'll be excited about this as well. I do love digital forensics. It is very interesting. It's one thing I didn't say is it's also the best witness. It's not my opinion. It is something that happened on a machine, and we're able to provide that to you. So it's been great. One other thing I want to, again, talk about career paths earlier, investigation, some stories, and then we'll talk about incident response and how those tie together. I'm hoping you guys appreciate what I'm trying to build here. I'm using my hands, but just roll with me. As digital forensics is kind of the core. Like, it's where it starts. If you can't start there, then you have no basis to even roll into incident response. You have forensics, you have preservation, you have analysis, you have data collection, analysis, production, court. Now, what we can do, imagine that, but you put in incident response. You have a company that got ransomware. How do you know how to find it? It's digital forensics. You're literally going back and finding what happened, when it happened, and what did it do, right? So you have a phishing email that comes in, and I don't know, Mary clicked on the email. That email downloaded a payload to the machine. It executed, took over her machine, maybe elevated privilege, and then started to go laterally through the environment. All those steps and that information can be recovered in a digital forensics process and with the tools. So this career field is really large. You can go as far as you want with it. Obviously, I love it, kind of how it bounces up. And then even at the very end of this, which is kind of the teetering top, because they always cross, well, we talked about compliance as well, but even at the end, there's pen testing and audits, right? So cybersecurity audit, what do you have for your collection? Do you preserve data? How do you preserve data? There's also digital forensic audits that can really come into play at this. Again, we worked, I've worked over, I probably should have said this in the beginning, but it's fine. Welcome back. I worked over 2,300 court cases. I'm a certified expert witness in state and federal court, meaning I've been put on the stand, I think definitely more than 12 times on federal cases and state cases. So I can speak as an expert, meaning my testimony means more to the court than as if a quote, they call them layman or a witness would be. That's something that takes a little while to achieve. I don't like being on the stand. It's terrible. So if you're into that, it's the place to be. Plus, it's super high stakes. Kind of going, if you do go that career field, know that your testimony could put people on death row. It could also save people from death row. I would like to get into a quick little story about one we did with the FBI. Who else was it? OSBI and Lawton PD. And I put this out there because it's super public knowledge now. Why is it important to understand digital forensics? Why it's important to do this? Because if law enforcement comes at you, said you did something bad, the witness in that case is law enforcement. And, we're all humans. I'm not opposed to law enforcement. I like law enforcement. They help protect us, but we're all human. We can all make mistakes. Worked a case where a gentleman was alleged of downloading a aggravated child pornography possession and distribution, which in the state of Oklahoma, that's probably you're going to jail for the rest of your life, which, maybe they should. During that time, I did the analysis of 7 machines. Again, we talked about, so they did the collection, right? They did the forensic collection. We talked about that. We did the analysis. Also did data carve. So on those machines, I found some really weird stuff. Not going to be wrong. It was very strange stuff. However, I didn't find any CP. It's child pornography. We'll talk about that. But CP going forward. So what I did was I found the CD and I said, where'd the CD come from? They're like, well, this came from the FBI. And I was like, oh, this is bad. This is horrible stuff. And I said, well, how do you know it came from this IP address? They said, well, the internet service provider gave us this information. And that's why we issued the arrest order. And that's why this guy got arrested. This gentleman also worked for a very large company in the area and worked there for 20 years. He got death threats. He lost his job. He didn't get fired. He got let go, kind of-ish, squishy, and burnt all his 401k on my services and his attorney services. So again, two years later, fast forward. We're in court, and I've been begging and complaining that we need to look at these IP addresses because you guys know this is going to blow your mind. Do we all know the difference between a static and a dynamic IP address? Okay. Static is something that you would pay for as a company because you have assets that point back, like your VPN, stuff like that. You don't want that to change. In a residential environment, you have a dynamic, meaning it changes. It kind of jumps around using DHCP from the internet service provider. So the report that the law enforcement had, FBI, was about 4 years old. And I was like, there's no way this guy had the same IP address. I'm telling you. So I was complaining a lot and I wasn't getting any information. I was getting stonewalled. And then I'm literally sitting on this hard wooden bench. That's why I don't like to testify. I'm sitting on the worst seats ever. I think they do it by design to shake you out, to shake you down a bit. And I'm sitting there for like literally 7 hours and 35 minutes. And then because this court's over, it's about to be done. Agents run back out. They find out that I'm going to go talk to the judge personally. And they finally were able to put their hands around the throat of the internet service provider and show that he didn't have that IP address at that time. Dude lost everything, right? But you know what? I did tell him, I was like, man, if you didn't do it, I said, dude, I got your back. But if you did it, it'll be easy for me to figure out. So my big question at that point, they were like, okay, it wasn't him. Case dismissed. Awful. 2 years of your life. Good luck with that. Then I said, well, hold up, though. Where's the guy? Because we have records of who had this IP address. Let's go after him, right? Let's find the right criminal. They did the crime, do the time, right? Long story short, we found the guy. Dude was serving a prison time for aggravated possession of child pornography. I hope that just blew everyone's mind, right? So had we not been involved in doing digital forensics and walking through those specific steps, this guy would have been in jail, wrongly in jail for the rest of his life. And what happened with the news article? All they did, they just cut his face out. It's still out there on the internet. Last I checked, about 2 years ago. And then he can just kind of sue, I guess, to maybe get his life back in order. But that's what happened. Why is digital forensics important? Because the data doesn't lie, and it's the most honest and most best representation for the court. So I thought you guys might appreciate that story. So I'm kind of rebooting back. I'll let you kind of digest. That was pretty heavy story. People love that one. But kind of going forward, Donovan, how does this get into incident response? I like to actually talk about IR from so there's traditional forensics, which we kind of talked about, imaging, analysis, production, all that stuff. And there's another one I like to call incident response forensics, meaning, Donovan, we don't have time to, which a lot of these, I call them older forensic guys, they get in, incident response happens and they're ransomwared and we need to image every machine. Well, that's cool. That's fine. That's going to cost a lot of money, but the company actually needs to make money because they're down. So the ransomware has taken over an environment. The forensic guys wants to image each and every machine. By the way, best case, like best super fast ninja case, you have hard drives that are, we'll say 250 gig. That's going to take them Best case, smoking hot. They got 50 devices that do forensic imaging, which is a tableau. Talk about that later. Maybe 2 hours a piece, right? And let's say you have even 10 machines. So you're going to take that, and then you have to analyze them and to probably process a machine with, deleted data, logs, all that stuff. You're talking 4 to maybe 15 hours a piece per machine, best case. That's with nothing collapsing. So that's not realistic for the world we live in today when you're doing incident response. So I started teaching probably in, I'm going to say like 2017. I started doing memory forensics, and I would call it Windows. I just made it up. It was like, I call it quick Windows forensics. So what I've done is I'll go into an incident. I'll try to check a machine that's infected would be where I would go to. I mean, I know we have a lot of EDR. We're not talking about that. We're talking just gunslinging forensics here. So we have a machine that got ransomware. Go to that machine, collect the memory off of it, whether it's the server would be recommended, or the maybe you have the 0 day, the patient that got hit first. Collect that data, and you can actually see top to bottom of, for some reason, they accessed, this website. We can do a background on that website. I'll just keep, this might be better for a story. So big company, had about 600 users. Ransomware came in. They couldn't figure out how they got in. So they were a little afraid to fix everything, right? So what they were doing for the longest time is their EDR was just eating it, right? It was finding the malware, air quotes, finding the Trojan, air quotes, but it just kept getting reinfected. Well, what the real answer is that it actually didn't get rid of the rootkit. So the rootkit was just trying to spin up 15 different variants of ransomware and some exfiltration data techniques like Mimikatz, for example. There's a few other ones, but as an example. So forensic image, I was able to capture the memory using FTK Imager, by the way. There's a really cool button. You click on it, does all the memory. You can pull it into a tool called Volatility, which I forget his name is Andrew. He's out of the Louisiana area. He provided this to the public. He's a hero, unsung hero for sure. Still developing it today. I believe he developed a company out of that, so good for him. So what it's a tool that you can use. It is command line, so that's fine. Apologize in advance, but it is what it is. What I was able to do is I was able to run a timeline analysis on this machine and determine it did something really weird, right? So everyone, even at that time, a few years ago, everyone's kind of using Chrome or something. Who knows? People use Brave. I feel like it changes a lot. What I noticed in action on this is they used Internet Explorer, which we all know that has been retired. And I was like, why would it launch Internet Explorer? What I found out was it was kind of genius. So what the attackers did is they used Internet Explorer because no one opens it because, Edge is naturally installed, like it's the default. And if you didn't know this, Internet Explorer, until recently, it was still on the machine. So you could still use IE even though Edge was out. You just had to type it in. So what they were doing is they know that you would never patch IE because no one would launch that because it died. Not really. They were using a exploitable Internet Explorer to reach out to malware sites and download payloads, and that's how they got into the environment. So we use Volatility to use, I used you guys may be familiar with Task Manager. You click on the right, has all the processes running on the machine. Well, there's a PID and a PPID. So a PID is the parent ID. The PPID is basically the baby, the parent process ID. Well, I got that backwards. Parent process ID is the parents. The process ID has like a mother and a father. And that's, you can say, let's say a process is called, SV host, which you have like 8,000 of those, right? But what other processes did this birth? What a lot of malware does is it'll spin up a process ID. It'll spin up, the payload will start, it'll spin up like 8 other processes and it'll delete itself. So it'll have 8 processes that doesn't have a parent, so you don't know really where they came from. And it's kind of genius. You guys may have heard of malware running in memory. That's where it ran. And it did that on a lot of machines. So what I did, I used the one of the tools in Volatility to run against the memory. And I was actually able to see, it's called last exited. And it says last exited of a process that deleted itself. So it was really easy for me to run that. I forget the command, So you guys will look up against volatility. I was able to see the last exited of a task, and it was called like XYLB, XR, whatever, something very obvious. At that point, I was able to get that. I was able to export that process because it was a DLL. I was able to generically, again, what do you guys want to use? Upload it to VirusTotal, know what tool actually can clean the environment, install that into the environment, and do a full clean. Because the biggest problem with infections, malware, and ransomware is you may not have the tool running today is not the tool that can fix it. I'm not saying jump around and use every different tool. I'm just saying that no tool is the best tool, right? If you got infected, clearly the tool you're using is not the tool you should be using. Doesn't mean you have to change every year, but that's kind of how we're doing. So you can run that against other tools, and VirusTotal, for example, like 50 tools, and whether it's a Carbon Black or whether it's Kaspersky or some other tool, you can download the free one and get the environment clean. So using digital forensics with memory, I was able to figure out what process was kicked off, what the actual file type, get a signature of the malware, upload it, get a file signature, and then we can kind of ban that. Where if you have an EDR and they don't have it, you don't currently have that signature, you can put that rule setting in your whatever Carbon Black, Sentinel-1, or whatever SLU you have. Doesn't matter. Palo Alto 1, 2. That way you can fully protect your environment and start doing a clean sweep and getting the environment clean. And that's how you would go for using digital forensics to rebuild an environment and incident response. One other thing I want to talk about is also the networking thing. So we talked about memory forensics. There's also network forensics. One of the hardest parts is when you get involved is finding command and control. Command and control can be super tough. So we're going to dip our toes in this. I may actually do another one down the road, but I'm just going to high level this one. So a command and control is basically like the mothership, as we'll dramatically. There's a mothership, alien mothership, and it is communicating with its alien buddies in your network, right? So they're all malicious aliens, and what they're doing is they're learning was what the ransomware teams are doing. They're learning about your environment. Today, they don't hit you and then ransomware you. They learn about you. They want to learn how emails flow. They want to see who talks to who. What does the network architecture actually look like? Is this an international company? Is this a local company? So what they're doing is they're aliens locally, right, in your network, are communicating to the mothership up in the cloud, basically is the cloud, or in the mothership, right? Hope you appreciate the analogy. Little green men are taking over ransomware. That's what it's all about, right? We're gonna jump into alien conspiracies after this, by the way. That's a different podcast. But what it is they're communicating back and forth this information. And what you can do is you can use a tool called Wireshark. Again, I love to let people know how super old I am technology. You can use T-Shark. I got high fives from all the command line boys out there for that one. But you can do what's called a packet capture. You can take this packet capture and you can put it into a tool called Network Miner. It's the best tool on the planet, and it is free. And what I like to do is it'll basically take all the packets and it'll give you user IDs. It'll give you attachments. It'll give you passwords if it's unencrypted, which you can do on that one. And also it'll give you, my favorite one is, it's not about, everyone wants to see who is the loudest talker. Like using up the most traffic is probably the most one infected. What I like to do is flip that upside down, look at it from the other side and say, who is talking the least or who's talking the most to a specific host? Like boom, boom. And is there a rhythmic to that? You can investigate each IP address in that packet that you captured and see who's talking to a host that's external, maybe once every 5 seconds, maybe it's 15. And that's how you can probably figure out where your command and control is. I will tell you this, though, kind of stepping off of the digital forensics, one thing we did learn is there's a new technique called booby trapping. It's not really new. Term's not. This technique is. We worked a case. Actually, this is our second case. Is a company got ransomware. And what they did, rightly, I panicked, right? They all started printing resumes. Just kidding. They were actually trying to work the incident. And as soon as the aliens, remember, aliens in your network weren't talking to the mothership, that's when they dropped the payload to do ransomware. So they were in the network, right? Check this out. looking around, getting all the information, trying to figure out who they can talk to, maybe what they can rant, maybe what they can steal or sell on the dark web, whether that's access, whether that's the company's files, whether that's the HR folder or something like that. What they had a booby trap was if they find that we're in here and they disconnect us from the mothership, we're going to do a booby trap PowerShell and we're going to encrypt, we're going to run ransomware throughout the entire company, which was pretty wild. So using digital forensics, in one case, we were able to show that find the PowerShell that was going to activate that. So we left the network as such, was able to find the PowerShell script that was going to ransomware the company, because we test that in some VMs, and we were able to actually remove that PowerShell and disable it from those environments, and also isolate the servers before we disconnected it and rebuilt the domain. So kind of going back with digital forensics, that was a really long story, but kind of some new techniques I thought you guys might appreciate about. These are probably like 3-month-old techniques that ransomware teams are doing these days. So kind of recapping here, digital forensics is the core of evidence for court. You have to have a chain of custody. If you don't, like, it doesn't even matter. And also, you can be held personally liable for this, so you got to be careful. So if you do get your hands in dirty, make sure you know what you're doing, because I would hate to see you get in trouble for that. It could be devastating for you in your career. Analysis. It's analysis where we kind of go through the machine. We find critical pieces of evidence. We export or recover deleted data. We can build a timeline. Analysis, so a timeline of when someone got in the machine, what they changed, what they did, what websites they went to, what emails they sent. All that stuff is located inside the forensic image that you created. A lot of career fields in this. Again, we talked about digital forensic examiner, like I am, we are here. Preservation, a lot of court, a lot of divorce cases, a lot of business-to-business stuff. It doesn't have to be with and against law enforcement. We do all of the above because data is data, and forensics data is the best witness in the case. Kind of going into that incident response, don't forget about volatility. It's the bomb. That's where you do your memory analysis. You don't have to wait for a forensic image to get done and then process and analyze the image. You can attack the issue at point, find the signatures, protect the company across, whether using your EDR, and put that signature across the environment, get it protected, get everything locked down before you start rebuilding, because if you don't, you're just going to shoot yourself back in the foot and you're going to get ransomware again. And then the last part is, just be careful with the data. Be careful not to change it, manipulate it. Any changes on that. And then I forgot, the last piece for the e-discovery. That's a whole career field. Processing, labeling, tagging, building evidence for court, and presentation for court. Those are very big, I would say, highly skilled jobs in very large corporations and law firms, which is kind of interesting because it still overlaps with cybersecurity. And I always like to echo this is I got an email from a student that wanted to get into cybersecurity, but she didn't want to code. I think I talked about this before. And I'm like, well, I do pen testing too. I don't know how to code. And it kind of overlaps a few other things. She's like, but I kind of like the investigation portion. I was like, well, why don't you do incident response? Because you don't have to code, but you're not traditional forensics like law enforcement or that stuff. You can do more. It's almost like it's red teaming. I'd say it's action blue team is really what it is. That's what IR is, action blue team. So that way it's a little more exciting. It's a little more intense. And that was kind of her value, because she wanted to do cybersecurity because a lot of people are like, cybersecurity, it's the way to go. It's the growing field. And I don't think people really know the different jobs that are in that. And that is one of the big ones I want to push out there is when you hear the term cybersecurity, just don't think of pen testing. Don't think of a SOC. Think of digital forensics. Think of incident response. Think of even rebuilding domains from ransomware. Obviously pen testing, SOC monitoring, and even, like I said, a lean-in blue team with that. So there's many career fields with that. And I hope that the information I gave you all today was helpful. If you do have any questions or comments or want to troll me on the internet, you can do that. Check us out on YouTube. Obviously, all the podcast stations are on that. I really appreciate your time. If you guys have any other recommendations, this was the one from a fan who wants to do digital forensics. I can do another one. We can go like round 2, get a little deeper, maybe more technical. I'll make sure I have at least 4 or 5 stories we can do. I can definitely be down to throw down for that. Also, this is my other second shameless plug of the Secure After Dark. We are about done building our new studio. Again, kind of reiterating that we're going to do maybe some bourbon tasting. We're going to talk about actually hacking stories, maybe some more. It's going to be more storytelling. And then we might get into some recent 0 days. We just had the Barracuda we were going to discuss. We talked a lot about that. We did see some blowback from the industry and some issues from that. And we can kind of get down to that. So it's a little more on the offensive, kind of more chatty if you're into that. That's why it's the After Dark one. But again, I'm Donovan Farrow. I appreciate your time. Thank you again for joining me on Secure AF Podcast. Have a great day.